Recording in progress, it says, so that we can make this available to other people via YouTube. So welcome everybody. And Peter is talking to us from his home in London. And William is here with me so that I can have a conversation with both Peter and then William. We'll do those separately. And I'm going to now share the screen so you can see what the show looks like, and I can talk over it. So let's just go share and just rewind that back to the beginning. And this is about 5 minutes long. And we'll talk about the show. So we wanted to put together a show as part of our 40th anniversary celebrations, and it seemed very natural to invite Peter Layton, as he's one of the longest standing glass artists to show in Pyramid Gallery. We immediately thought that William's paintings would go very nicely with this show, so we invited William Watson West to do that. And that's what we're looking at now. I was going to tell you the names of some of those, but they've moved on too quickly for me, unfortunately. That's a piece of glass by Sila
Yucel.
Sila Yucel. And there's a couple of Peters there. Those are items from stock. We're actually expecting Cathryn Shilling to send work as well. So I'll fill her spaces up with pieces from stock. I've got two birds by Bruce Marks. And those are Peter's Glacier. Oh, sorry about that jerkiness. I don't know why it's doing that. It wasn't before. And Layne Rowe, that's a piece that he calls Picking Daisies. It's obviously an anti-war statement. And below there, we've got Anthony Scala's. These are two very new pieces, abstract geometry in the front. And behind it is an orrery bottle. An orrery is one of those things that shows the planets rotating around the sun. And another abstract geometry. And that's a piece, I think, is that Monet, Peter?
Not quite sure, I couldn't tell.
Might be Highgrove. And two ice caps. These are Peter's cast and cut and polished pieces. That's, what are those called, Peter? Sari Shibori.
Those were called Marrakesh.
Oh, surely, no, those are Marrakesh below. Okay. We've got Masari Shibori.
Oh, you're right, you're right.
Yeah. And then Marrakesh. And in between was Spirali.
Yeah.
These are Layne Rowe's woven range, a basket and a tall basket, and lovebirds. Quillinings. And those are two new woven pieces. And again, woven pieces that he calls paniettes. And here we've got Sarah Wiberley. These are blown and then sandblasted right down to this, these two colours below.
Various layers.
Yes, various layers of glass, very heavily sandblasted. And that's an Anthony Scala piece called Annulum. These are by Layne Rowe. He calls them Corruption, and those are both Paradiso by Peter. And this one's the Hockney-inspired Garaby and Hockney-inspired Arrival of Spring. And there's the book. I can show you the book when we're talking a bit more. And we're back to the beginning of that. And it's going to go through to the other room. What's that big one called then? Finding the Edge. Red Haze. Red Haze. And then we've got this lovely series of small paintings. So these are acrylic on board. And they're priced about £240, is that right? Yeah. and there's Peter Layton's Burano pair. And we'll just look around. Now, there aren't any more pieces for this particular show in here, but William's paintings are in the back room. And we're looking now at pieces that are in the gallery or part of the gallery collection. That's beautiful.
Middle ground.
Middle ground. You've done well to remember. I can't remember.
Wow, probably the only one I can remember.
That's a Colin Reed circle in the middle there. Dance Dreams.
Disco Dreams.
Oh, Disco Dreams and Crowd. Observing.
That's my favourite.
London Blue.
London Blue, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we'll talk to William about the paintings later on. And we'll go back now to stop sharing. And hopefully you can see Peter, and you'll probably see me and William, but we'll have a brief talk about Peter's life and career, and hopefully we can talk about particular pieces of glass while we're doing that. So Peter, you were born in Prague. You came to the UK aged 2, fleeing from the Nazis in 1939, and lived first in Surrey, but came to Bradford during the war to live with your grandfather. After grammar school, you worked in the textiles industry before being called up for national service with the RAF. You became a ceramicist after a year at art school in Israel. I guess not many people listening will realise that you have a piece of work, well, I think it's 2, out on display in York Art Gallery amongst the collections of ceramics. And I wanted to go and check this today, but I didn't manage to. And we believe it's pieces of glass that Bill Ismay collected, and they had put them out with the ceramic collection. Hopefully they're still on display. You consider yourself a Yorkshireman. How important to you was Yorkshire, and do you still have strong connections?
Oh, Yorkshire was very important. I grew up in Bradford. Yeah, all my school and early youth took place in and around Bradford. So Bradford and Leeds, and the odd trip to York, I suppose. Yeah. No, I have very, very fond memories of where there's brass, you know, and it was, I worked in Batley in the textile industry, in the heavy woolen, in the shoddy industry, shoddy and Mungo, Batley and Dewsbury. It was dirty work. It was filthy, in fact, and I'm certainly glad I got out of it. But,
so was it a relief to be called up into the RAF then?
No, it was national service, and I had hoped to get out of it, to be truthful. But the good thing was my boss, who I was a managerial trainee in what was effectively a rag merchant, not rag and bone men, you know, big bales of mucky stuff, but he actually did something quite unusual. He paid me a retainer while I was in the RAF so that I would come back. But having said that, and I did go back, but by then I was ready to move on.
I can't resist name dropping the name Hockney while we're talking about Bradford, and so he's obviously inspired 2 ranges of your work, at least that we know. Well, so you knew him.
We were friends at a certain point. Well, we still are. I mean, we greet each other if we bump into each other. We move in slightly different circles. I did see him at one of his PVs at the Royal Academy. In fact, the one that the show that had that Arrival of Spring painting in it, and he said, "You're looking good." You know, we're the same age, and he said, "You're looking good." He said, "I'm still smoking," you know, and at that point, Stephen Fry arrived arms akimbo to greet Hockney, and I was swatted aside like a little fly. He's huge, and I had no idea that Stephen Fry was that big.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can you remember how you first got in contact with Pyramid Gallery? How long have you been supplying?
What was the name of the previous owner then?
Well, previous were Anne Dawson and Martin Jackson.
No, prior to that.
And then there was a jeweler before that, but the first one was Robert Feather.
Jeweler. What was his name? Robert
Feather.
Yes. So I've been with Pyramid since Robert Feather owned it. He sought me out in my studio in Rotherhithe, and very early days of Studio Glass, and you know, my association with Pyramid's gone on forever, as it were.
Well, I came here in 1994, 1st of June, and my first 2 days had 3 memorable events that involved glass. And I knew nothing about glass making. In fact, I was not from an art background. I was a quantity surveyor. The first thing that happened was that a customer happily paid quite a lot of money, in my view, for a perfume bottle that was made by Chris Cummins. And that pleased me. I didn't know that there were collectors of glass perfume bottles. My second experience with glass was the realization of how dreadful it feels when you break a piece. I knocked a ceramic vessel off a shelf in the window. They had these wobbly shelves, and it dropped onto an even more expensive glass perfume bottle. And I still hurt when I think about that occasion. 2 things broken in one moment. And my third event was in the second day that we'd opened the door. The thrill of selling a large white flask made by yourself, Peter. We've talked about this before. We think it was a floral piece. So it was a tall flask shape. And it was a German man, and he obviously knew much more about this subject than me. He spent over £200, and the excitement of this made my entire body shake as I took the payment. It still happens actually when I sell something that A is a lot of money, B is something I don't really want to part with. So I became a fan of glass in the first 2 days, and this has become a very enjoyable obsession. If I had more money to spend, I'd have a house full of stuff. So can you tell us about your first encounters with glass?
Yes. I studied ceramics at the Central School, and under some of the leading potters of the day, a lot of them are showing in the collection in York Museum. Gordon Baldwin and Ian Old and Ruth Duckworth, a lot of Dan Arbide, a lot of the very good potters of the day were around then. And I slightly went off left field and did a project where I was fusing glass. It was fashionable just at that moment. There was one of the potters, what was his name? Bill, it escapes me. Anyway, he was doing a lot of work for interiors, the Golden Egg cafes and restaurants. And one of the fashionable things to do was to melt broken glass or glass onto glass is like glaze, pottery glaze, similar sort of material and temperatures. And the fashion was to melt glass onto ceramic in those days. And I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea if you could actually melt it into ceramic, but be able to see through it rather than it just be in the base of a dish or whatever. And so I experimented a bit, and that was my first contact with glass, and I was quite excited by it. I didn't do a great job, but it was quite interesting. And then I went to teach ceramics in America, in the States. And while I was there at the University of Iowa, the studio glass movement was brand new and was young. I mean, glass making is a couple of thousand years old, but artists or craftsmen like me with no glass background wouldn't have had access to glass. Glassmaking was a closely guarded secret passed from father to son in factories, in large or in workshops, who didn't normally invite people in to try their hand. And anyway, a chap called Harvey Littleton had run a workshop at the Toledo Museum. And one of the participants in that came to my university and set up a workshop. So we built a studio together. It was a summer school. You know, it was one of these things you sign up for, and it was a summer school. And although I was on the teaching staff, I signed up with the students. I'd never handled glass blowing. And it was really amazing. But after 3 days, I burnt myself really badly. It was the blind leading the blind, and no tuition was sadly lacking. I burnt myself terribly badly. The back rolled molten glass over the back of my hand. I thought, oh, that's it, finish. But glass is a magical medium. It's incredible, and it gets on. You know, it got me. You get hooked. Once you try it, you get hooked, and that's what happened. So it took me a long time to switch. I came back to the UK, and there wasn't much glass around, but I became friendly with Sam Herman, and he let me dabble a bit at the Royal College, and I was playing with it a bit. I was teaching ceramics in various places, and then he set up the glass house in Covent Garden, and I worked there a little bit. And eventually I decided, you know, I had a big exhibition at the Commonwealth, what was in those days called the Commonwealth Art Gallery. And the director was very brave. He didn't know quite what he was going to get. Maybe he thought he was going to get some pots from me, because at that point I was still throwing, and my how can I say it? My philosophy was to throw with the wheel going far too fast. So there was a slightly Zen kind of quality to the throwing, and it was quite, I could barely control it. So it had a nice wobble to it and so on. It was a little ahead of its time, I suspect. And, but I couldn't get this glass out of my mind. And so I had this show at the Commonwealth, which was great success, but it was big sculptural installations, mostly ecological in content. And having done that, I just thought I want to get back to, that was a bit cerebral and conceptual. And I thought I want to get back to using my hands, and I moved into glass again. And I found my own studio on the banks of the Thames, called it London Glassblowing, and the rest is history, really. We were there for 15 years.
You just mentioned Sam Herman, and I was very pleased when in Stourbridge a couple of years ago, you were walking around with him, and you made a big effort to introduce me to him, which was huge. It felt like a huge honour. Sadly, he's no longer with us. He died shortly afterwards, I think, didn't he?
He did, yes. He's a sort of the father of Britain. He was an American. He was a student of Harvey Littleton's at the University of Wisconsin, which was the first studio glass department, first place teaching studio glass. And he came over to this country on a Fulbright, and actually ended up as senior lecturer in glass at the Royal College of Art.
Yeah, would you have managed to progress the career you have if he hadn't enabled it in the 60s then?
That's a really interesting. That's the one I sometimes think I might have progressed better, but no, I don't know. No, I'm not sure about that. He certainly was a strong influence on glass in this country and elsewhere. He worked in Australia too. He took studio glass, or he didn't take it, but he helped the Australian studio glass movement to develop. And Yeah, he was a strong character.
Let's talk about other artists that have influenced you and the work you do. We mentioned Hockney, but there was some others that I think we need to mention. And I showed you a picture last week on my phone of one of William's paintings, just so you knew what was going to be on the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
Instantly, you said, "Oh, this reminds me of Howard Hodgkin," and William, I know, is quite happy to be mentioned in the same breath as Howard.
Yeah, not a bad.
Yeah, just let's just talk. Let you talk about how other artists have introduced it. Let's start with the Paradiso range.
I do have really quite a lot of heroes. I suppose that's the way of looking at it. People who inspire me. You know, I could rattle off a whole. Brancusi as a sculptor, Isamu Noguchi as a sculptor. A lot of painters, George O'Keeffe and Howard Hodgkin, as you've mentioned, people and Hockney I have a huge respect for, huge respect. Van Gogh, I've done series for the National Gallery, which I think you've had in the past, Sunflowers and wheat fields, and those kind of commissions from these prestigious museums are always a challenge and set you off on a path that you might not have gone, which I quite like. And so my, how can I put it? My ethos is not to copy a particular painting, but to try to somehow translate the essence, if you like, of, or the feeling of what an artist does. So that's certainly true of the things I've done with George O'Keeffe, and I actually did show some of them at the Tate when she had a show there, or sold them actually at the Tate, and at Tate Modern. And I've been influenced by a lot of. I had a wonderful commission, for instance, from a very favorite customer who sadly drowned off swimming in Cape Town. But he was Austrian and he was a great lover of Klimt, as I am. And I showed him a piece that had just somehow had reminded me or made me think of Klimt. And he immediately jumped on it and he said, "Oh, I'd like to." Anyway, between us, we came up with this one great commission. He said, "I'll give you £5,000 to develop 3 or 4 Klimt designs on the premise or on the agreement that I can have first pick of them. You know, I can have one of each design you choose." And I thought that was brilliant, to be paid to do that kind of research or that kind of development. And most of my work is, I mean, the exciting thing about working in glass is that it's so immediate and you get the result. It's a bit like painting in many ways. You build it up in layers and you get a result. You may not get a finished design. That could take weeks, months, years even, but the experimentation that takes place along the way is what's exciting, you know. And the reason I suppose that I moved from ceramics to glass, or one of the reasons, is that ceramic clay is marvelous stuff and I love it. And the idea of getting your hands into it is brilliant. You can't actually touch the glass with your hands. That's one of the differences. But it's pretty long-winded, you know. You have to, especially if you're a hand builder, you coil these things or you slab build them, and then you dry them. And if you're lucky, they don't crack. Then you put them into what's called a bisque firing or biscuit firing. and then you glaze them and you fire them again. You know, and you might get some potters probably have a firing a week, some have a firing a month, some only have one firing a year, you know, and there's all that waiting around, you know. Whereas with the glass, you're opening the kiln every day or every other day. So developing an idea can take a long time, but getting a result is quite quick. And that's, I enjoy that. So that allows me to do a lot of experimenting or changing elements within a piece, as William does with his paintings, you know, I suspect. I think there are a lot of...
It's very interesting to hear that similarity and the sort of spontaneity and I suppose the playfulness that you can have with it.
Exactly.
I didn't necessarily expect that it would be the case with Glassblowing, so it's really fascinating to hear.
It isn't the case for every maker, you know.
Yeah.
Some makers love to make make wine glass sets of wine goblets, and everyone's got to be perfect and the same.
Yeah.
You know, that's not my.
I suppose it could be the same with painting in respect of realism or hyper-realism. Some people like to do that sort of style and really making something absolutely, I suppose you could say perfect. Portraiture and things like that. It's a different art
approach.
Yeah.
I very much like the word you use, playfulness. I think that sense of playing with the medium is really at the bottom of what we probably both are about, you know, and want to do.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to mention your book. Hopefully people can see that, and it's beautifully illustrated. Lovely. You buy it just for the pictures if you don't like reading words. I've just picked a page here. Gito or Gito?
Well, we call it Gito, but I think it is actually Gito. It's the name of a orangutan that we adopted. Anne and I, my wife runs the studio, runs the business, runs the gallery, and has done an amazing job. We went to Borneo with a group of people who were taking medical equipment for vets in Borneo, and as a result, we're able to get pretty close to orangutan families and foundations that we're working to save them. I mean, there are some that are for tourists where you can actually handle them, but that was definitely not on that didn't happen to us, but we did adopt this little chap, Gito, who's actually now been returned to the forest. So they grow up with nannies who take them out into the forest. I mean, it is incredible. You can see, there was a marvelous program on TV I saw that showed how the orangutan are rewilded, as it were.
So this is an example of how travel influences you. And,
yes. So the problem with the orangutan is the business of palm oil. You know, the palm oil.
Yes.
That are destroying their habitat. Yes, travel is really important, and I suppose one of the. However, having said that, of course, now we're entering a phase in our lives, A, because of age, getting pretty old, and B, because of the problem of
global warming,
climate change. Exactly.
Yes,
and that's something that's been concerned me for a long time. Those sculptures I told you about in the 60s, believe it or not, late 60s, early 70s rather. Early 70s, 1972, those were ecological statements. That series was called Please Keep Off the Grass. And I remember that about 8,000 people saw that show, and I was absolutely thrilled at the time. That was a lot of people. Yeah.
So yeah, we've got the ice caps here, which obviously influenced by environmental concerns. Yeah, how do you feel about it now? If you were setting out now, how would you balance this? I mean,
I feel pretty desperate most of the time,
yeah,
and slightly. This is, that's a cruncher question. Slightly hypocritical in that we're burning fuel, and however, we are a very small studio relative to industry, and
hopefully your art helps spread the message.
I'm very keen. I'm interested and keen on exploring the idea of using hydrogen in the future. I don't know if that'll happen in my lifetime, but yeah,
that would be an interesting piece of glass. So I think we've just got to rush through the last few I've got here. You're now in your mid-80s, still creating new work. I just wanted to know what's the typical day like for you, and how did it change with the COVID pandemic?
Wow. Well, lockdown was great for me. I did a huge amount. I did a lot of walking in. We lived near a park, and you could go to the park. That was one of the things I could do. Dulwich Park is glorious, has the most wonderful collection of trees. And in fact, there's one in there that's called one of the great trees of London. I think it's a Turkey oak, and it's huge. Anyway, so I became very interested in leaves and dapple, and I picked leaves up. I do. I'm a big beach comber, but when I couldn't get to the beach, I was picking up leaves or looking through foliage and stuff. So actually, my latest series, which I don't think you've seen yet, Terry, I've got two in my latest connection. One is dapple and one is leaf. Those are the titles of two new series, and I'm quite excited by them. I think they're leading elsewhere. That's the thing I love, and it's probably the thing you love too, William. It's a continuous evolution, really, isn't it?
Mm.
That's the thing one hopes to achieve.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got a new member in your family, your daughter.
Yes. I'm very lucky in that I mentioned Anne runs things. My son-in-law is very, do you have a piece of his there, Tim Rawlinson?
Not at the moment, no, we've had the work, but not
I know, it's hard to get them. His work is hugely in demand, but he's, I was going to say a rising star, but I think he's risen. He's beginning to show all over the States, and probably, we can't get enough of his work in our gallery. I mean, I could show you a piece, but I have one here. But
can find a piece. Yeah.
And he married my daughter, who's quite an established printmaker, and she's also becoming interested in glass. She's doing really interesting work with enamels, which is a kind of glass is a bit of a dying industry in some respects, or it has died in this country, other than the studios. We are the industry, really. And there are still, well done, yes, good.
Yeah. So the screen goes big. I'll just say that's Tim Rawlinson's work. And
he's a very talented young man.
Yeah,
anyway,
I love it.
Anyway, they've recently produced a beautiful daughter called, I know I'm a bit biased, but she is unbelievably wonderful, and we're besotted. She's called Olive, and she's about
wonderful news. So you've got generations there to carry on the London glass blowing.
That may be the case. We hope.
Let's hope so. Thank you, Peter. So we're going to talk with William now, and because we've just got 23 minutes left. So William, you showed with us here in September 2020, and we're delighted to have you back. Let's just make sure we can see.
Lovely to be back.
You've been painting for about 10 years since graduating from Edinburgh University, which was actually a course in textiles. So how did your art career begin?
So I suppose I've always loved painting and drawing. And then I went to Leeds College of Art actually to do my foundation, which is where I discovered textiles. And then I managed to get into Edinburgh College of Art, or part of Edinburgh Uni now, on a textiles course, and threw myself into that, and was very lucky in that there was quite a lot of freedom to really sort of be a bit more painterly, and as well as learning the sort of skills of printmaking, which is what I specialised in there, and silkscreen printing. I sort of didn't stop painting really, and when I graduated and left there, I carried on with my textiles for a bit, with more, I suppose, representational figurative designs, and then my paintings became a little bit more, started becoming a bit more abstract, and I thought, why don't I try and put my paintings onto textiles? So I started doing that, and the more I did that, the more I enjoyed the painting, and I suppose I just continued painting and exhibiting my work, and now I don't do any of the textiles at the moment. It's not to say I won't in the future, but I'm focusing on the painting, and it's become much more abstract, I would say.
What do you get out of abstract that you wouldn't be satisfied with representational work?
It's definitely a lot to do with emotion and putting emotion onto canvas or board or whatever medium it is. I find that abstract and kind of, it's moved from sort of kind of abstracting representational things to now a lot of these paintings here are, I'd say sort of purely abstract, verging on the sort of abstract expressionist kind of style of things. So a lot of that is just an emotional response to things. There is always that foundation of my sort of representational drawings and drawings from life that I've done for a long time now. For as long as I could hold a pencil, I suppose, I've been drawing from life and encouraged by my parents to do so. And so that foundation and everything, I suppose, feeds in. So some of these paintings, which may just be a few sort of big, bold brush strokes, actually, they might not necessarily have been able to, or I might not be able to produce those without that initial drawing and sketching, and it all feeds in. But definitely an emotional response. And I suppose the last 2 years have been particularly, or few years, have been particularly strange and challenging, and it has conjured up all sorts of feelings and painting. And I'm sure it sounds like it's the same with the glass blowing. It's an outlet as well for expressing yourself and trying to, I sometimes say to people, it's sort of a way of answering things that I can't really find an answer to. And so by painting, it's sort of doing that a little bit. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, absolutely it does. So we already know that Howard Hodgkin was a major influence, and one of my favourite quotes of his, in fact it's the only one I could find, is he said, "I hate painting," which I won't. Do you believe him? Or do you,
well, I could do, because there are moments when it can be very frustrating, and especially if you're sort of part of you is desperate to paint, and then you start painting and you hate what you're doing and you can't stand the work you're producing, and so I could easily say I hate painting. I probably have said I hate painting, so I probably can relate to that. But I suppose the wider the bigger picture, you kind of I don't know.
Well, we're pleased that you like to sell yours.
Well, it's nice to show you.
What's a typical day for you, and how often are you painting? What do you do when you're not?
Well, I suppose I do tend to work quite, I don't know whether sporadically is that right word. I go through phases of producing an awful lot of work and a lot of work that I don't really like. And then phases of not producing as much and trying and failing. But there's a surprising amount of other things I have to do just to kind of keep it all going and paying the bills, I suppose.
Yeah.
And admin and things like that. But fresh air, getting away, getting inspiration where I can. And
Has being in London changed anything?
yeah, it's been a massive change for me. So for those of you that don't know, I moved to London from Yorkshire in September. I think you mentioned that, didn't you? But I have spent a bit of time in London in the past, and I love it. It's an amazing city, but it's been a bit of a strange time to move back there. But I'm now living down there with my girlfriend, and that's been really exciting. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire initially, a very different way of life to the sort of the rural Yorkshire life that I'm used to. But no, it's good, and it has, well, you'll see from these paintings, which most of them have been painted down in London. So and there's a definite change. And there are sort of elements of moodiness, I think, and elements of really uplifting, well, hopefully uplifting. We'll see what people think, but yeah.
So we're, yeah.
Sorry,
Peter.
what part of London are you in?
Over towards Dalston, in between Islington and Dalston.
Oh, very, very hip.
Yes, it's quite hipstery, I suppose. But yes, it's a good spot. There's quite a lot going on. I'm yet to be honest, to really explore the arty side of it yet. It's I'm only just starting to find my feet, but there's a lot to
Well, I
explore.
can recommend Bermondsey Street. There are a lot of good galleries and a lot of good restaurants.
I hear there's a good glass blowing studio there.
It's good, standing glass place. You should come and explore. It's a bit like New York there. It's got a good vibe. Got a good vibe.
Oh, I'd love
Yeah.
to.
Don't try and drive there. You just go round and round and round. So we were talking a little bit about travel, climate change. Some of us need travel for ideas. Where are you on this? What do you? I mean, do you find enough inspiration from your local environment?
It's interesting, actually. It varies. I do kind of feel like I can find inspiration wherever I am. Obviously, a lot of my work over the last 10 years, which sounds a bit crazy to say, has been inspired by Yorkshire landscape. So it is quite changed now, but I've been doing a bit of still life inspired things and flowers and looking at all those sorts of things. And actually the architecture in London has always really excited me. And it's a different landscape. I can find inspiration everywhere. I love the British Isles, love going up to Scotland, and so
that's lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, Hodgkin travelled a lot, didn't he? He was inspired by Morocco and India in particular.
India, yeah.
And some of your work does have that feel of it. That kind of,
well, it would be really interesting and exciting to explore a little bit more further afield and see what happens and see how it translates. So perhaps we'll see what's on the horizon.
Yeah. What do you currently? Oh, you've obviously been working on this show. Is there anything else coming up?
So I've got some work going off to a gallery, not online gallery, predominantly called Kate Preston Art, and she has various shows around the country. So that's the next thing. That's going to be in June, I think. And then there's nothing big planned, but I'm hoping to find something in London and do something with a couple of pals and have some kind of collaborative exhibition in a space yet to be found, but we'll see. That's the plan anyway, at some point towards the end of this year. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
And last time you showed here, you produced a book of lots of small paintings that you've done in lockdown.
Yeah.
And that was lovely. I think quite a few paintings sold from
so that was my isolation collection. Which, again, it was sort of inspired by, well, it couldn't really go very far. So a lot of that was to do with isolation and a bit of a roller coaster of emotions and things. And so.
Well, we look forward to the next book.
Well, it's a lovely way of recording this. And I was reading, Peter, your book earlier today and yesterday, and it's really, really inspiring and a really beautiful book, actually. So
thank you.
It's a great way of recording things and taking stock of everything that you've produced. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. It's great to have you here. So we've got the actual opening for this show on Saturday between 11 and 3 p.m. You'll be here, William.
Well, yeah.
And then Peter's going to come later on. So you're going to...
Sorry,
you may... just outside our building is... this is Ghost Walk territory. And they appear here about this time every night because they apparently had a ghost next door. It's only been seen once, so I don't think that quite counts as a ghost myself. But the story was that a little girl was leaning over the banister, listening to her parents having a party downstairs, and fell over. It's 5 stories drop, and that's what all the cheering is. He's telling the tale about this girl falling off the banister. Anyway, Peter, so you're coming here on Thursday the 19th of May, Peter?
Yeah.
I've got time between 4 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Well, we'll not hold you to that, but it's roughly right. Yeah. So we'll be telling people that they can come and meet you here in the gallery, and we'll put some sort of refreshments on as well. This show will go on till mid-July, and I think it looks fantastic. It's the gallery is looking as good as it ever has done, and we're really delighted to have it. So let's look forward to the next 40 years, Peter. You're celebrating 45 years this year, aren't you? In the class, or is it?
I think we're getting on towards 50, actually. But,
is it? Yeah.
Well, 45, yes, I guess so. But the other thing that might be worth saying, Terry, is that the other people in the show that you mentioned, Anthony and
Layne
and Bruce and
Sila,
they all work in or have worked in my studio, yes, and they're people that we've grown up together, as it were. Not really grown up yet, but
and perhaps 50 other glassmakers have had the same experience coming through your workshop.
It's some people sort of, that you asked about the pandemic. So the pandemic has had an effect on us. I mean, we were closed and people had to move on and do their own thing. So but it's often referred to as a creative hub, and people have enjoyed the sort of interaction. That's what's quite nice about you talked about isolation. I don't get on too well with isolation. I like to have a team, or a kind of team of people around me, working with me, helping. We influence one another and help one another. It's a form of collaboration, I suppose. You know, it's teamwork in a sense.
So did Bruce and Louis and Sarah have time out, or did they have to carry on?
They did time out. Yes, the studio was closed for a period.
Yeah, but they're back with you now.
They are. Well, yes, they are. Not everybody is. Layne is tending to work out of his own studio now, and Louis is away doing other things a lot of the time, and they're some of them off to America to a conference, the Glass Arts Society conference, in a week or two. You know, so we're kind of limping along a little bit in some respects.
Anthony is in his own studio.
Anthony's in his own studio. The difference is, William, that we've got quite a big sort of operation there, and the costs are astronomical. You talked about paying the bill.
Yeah.
That's the sad part, or the bad part of having to work in an expensive environment with high costs of fuel and materials that you've got to keep going.
I just want to mention also that's happening is that Cathryn Shilling will be sending work up next week. She couldn't quite meet the deadline because she had COVID, but so we're looking forward to receiving Cathryn's work here. So we'll finish here, but we'll just see if anyone wants to ask any questions. Just unmute yourself and ask, we just butt in. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you everyone who's going to watch this on YouTube once we have publicised it. And maybe we shouldn't have said that. Perhaps they would have tuned in live instead, but now they're waiting for the YouTube. It's a great learning experience for me. It's the first time I've done this. And I think there is a great future for it because it focuses attention, and it's great. Have a long conversation with you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you,
Terry. Yeah, I hope the show goes well.
Thank you. I'm sure it will. So I'm just going to stop recording now.